Having worked in higher ed for over 10 years, I get asked so many questions by college students. But in particular, when we're thinking about summer school, I get asked one particular question the absolute most. And that question is, what should I expect in a summer class or a summer term? Well, you're in luck. If you're trying to figure out if you want to take a summer class or a summer term, then look no further than this video. In this video, what I'm going to do is share 4 expectations that you should have when going into a summer class or a summer term. And I'm even going to share a bonus tip that you should be mindful of while taking a summer class. So if this sounds interesting to you and you want to know a little bit more, keep on watching. Hey y'all, my name is Michelle, but you can call me your college auntie. And I want to welcome you to my channel, College Auntie, which is really designed to help you college student, you watching this right now, be successful and win at college. My motto here on this side of the internet is that knowledge plus application equals wisdom. In other words, if you know better, you can do better, so you can be better. So what I do is provide you with content and really try to be who I wish I had when I was an undergrad. I would have killed for somebody like this to give me the ins and outs and really peep me the game on what college is all about and how to be successful. So if you want to know more, or if you like this type of content or this sounds interesting to you, make sure you hit that notification bell, subscribe, and keep on watching and share with friends. With that said, let's get into these 4 expectations plus bonus that you should have while taking a summer class. All right, so the first expectation is that summer terms are going to be fast paced. All right, so imagine you're in a normal semester, academic year, fall or spring, or sometimes depending on the institution, they may call the spring the winter, just depends. The fall or spring, and that's a normal 15-week semester. Well, if a student was taking the same course in the summer that may be offered in the fall semester, the assumption and the expectation is that you will learn the exact same content. Summer terms are often offered in smaller or shorter time frames. So if that means instead of you taking a 15-week semester like you would take in the academic year, if you're taking a 10-week semester, that likely means that the class is going to be condensed. It's going to be a lot of information in a very short time frame. Depending on the class and the content, it could kind of feel like a fire hose, just kind of like trying to get a cup of water from a fire hose, right? It doesn't mean it's not possible. It just means you got to be a little bit more strategic while you're taking in the information. So in order to take that information that would normally be in a 15-week semester and condense it to a 10-week semester, again, I mentioned beforehand, you'll have to move in a faster pace. That likely means that while in the academic year, you might have a class that same class that meets maybe 2 or 3 times a week for an hour a piece. You're probably going to be meeting a lot more frequently. So maybe 3 to 5 times a week for more than an hour. If it might be 2 to 3 hours, depending on the credit level, the number of contact hours. That's something that's specific to kind of like higher ed. But essentially, there's a certain amount of time that you have to be in that classroom and have face-to-face instruction with your instructor. And so in order to ensure that they get that and you have less weeks, that means the number of days you're going to meet in class along with the amount of time you're going to be in class is going to increase. So that's kind of what contributes to that kind of fire hose like feels. Not to say it's not doable, it's just to say you're going to have to be a little bit more strategic with how you kind of approach that class. Now, in general, the shorter the class length in the summer, the faster paced it would be and the more often you'll be meeting. Let's say, for example, you have a class that is only 3 weeks or maybe even a 6-week course. Then maybe, like I mentioned before, it would be instead of you meeting, sometimes the class might even meet once a week, you're meeting every single day, Monday through Friday for maybe 2 to 3 hours versus that every other day or once or twice a week for an hour a piece. So that's going to be a significant number of hours. So that is something to be mindful of. You should expect that when you go into a class, it's going to be faster paced and that you need to make sure you stay on top of your work. On to the second expectation that you should know for summer class. The second expectation is the number of credits you take will impact the workload that you have. So if you take on a number of credits, let's say, for example, you decide to take on 3 credits or maybe even 6 credits, then you're expected to essentially learn the material and master it within a shorter time frame. Because things are moving faster, the expectation is that you're going to have to master the content within a very short time frame. So I'll give an example. If you are taking a 3-credit course, I always tell students, rule of thumb, assume that the course you're going to take in the summer is going to feel like double the number of credits in terms of workload. So if you were taking a 3-credit course, that it might feel like you're taking, the workload might feel like a 6-credit course. And the reason why is because, again, it's a fast-paced course, but if you think about it, if you have a class that takes place every single day for 3 hours a day, you are learning potentially several chapters in a day, and you're moving on to the next section. There's not a lot of time to go over practice problems or emphasize or learn the information. Really what you're doing is you're expected to really learn or master it within that day, so that way you can move on to the next day. If you fall behind, it's really, really hard to catch up at that point because you would have missed a lot of information. With that in mind, here's my quick auntie recommendation for you. Try not to max out on credits. Be mindful of the number of credits you take, and don't just be taking the course just to be taking it. Because again, if you imagine the credit load feeling like double the amount of work, every class you take, every credit number you take is going to equate to more work. So if you are taking, let's say, for example, two courses for 6 credits, then that's going to feel like 12 credits. It's going to feel like a full-time workload over the summer, which means you are going to be kind of doing a lot, and you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you feel that you're not able to balance the workload for both classes. You could have a class that takes place for 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the evening, but the issue is how do you take the time to make sure that you master the material, that you understand it, and you're able to apply it, so that way the next day you're able to build off what you've learned if you're taking 2 classes that require a lot of work. So you want to make sure that you stagger classes if you can. So one class the first term versus another class the second term, just so that way you don't overwhelm yourself. But please, please, please do not overburden yourself with credits, because you might find that it might hurt you rather than help you. The third expectation that might be that although you are taking, in theory, a full-length course in the shorter time frame in the summer, you may still have fewer assignments required of you in the summer. Now, that could be good or bad. Now, typically in the academic year, you might find that you might have, exams worth a certain percentage, a certain number of exams. Let's say, for example, 3 exams in a final. You'll have reflections, maybe a teamwork assignment, other ways to kind of boost up or scaffold your grade, maybe group work or something of that sort. But then you might find in the summer, because there's less time, there's not as much time for you to be able to do group work, or maybe to do as many reflections, because it might overburden you as a student. So the instructor might compensate by reducing the number of assignments, which might be like, ooh, less work, yay. But on the other hand, that also means that you have less of an opportunity to boost your grade or to scaffold, to buffer your grade. So in the academic year, while you might have reflections that could potentially help you if maybe you had an exam grade that wasn't the greatest, or those homework assignments or the extra credit that might have been beneficial, you may not have that same flexibility in the summer. On the other hand, having fewer assignments means that you have more time to devote to those assignments and prepare for those exams or those major assignments. So that means you have the better chance of being to perform well in those classes or those assignments. Now, if you're finding this content from this video helpful, or there's some things that you've heard that maybe you haven't heard before, or they're nice refreshers, make sure you click that like button and subscribe, and then put a comment below to let me know what stood out to you. Maybe something that you learned that maybe you hadn't heard before, maybe it was a refresher, something you hadn't considered. Or share other thoughts that you have about expectations that maybe you weren't covered in this video, but you would like for me to cover in a future video. And make sure you stick around to the end of the video so that I can go through, of course, the 4th expectation and that bonus tip that would be crucial for you as a student taking a class in the summer. All right, so the 4th expectation is that attendance and time management are key. You need these to be successful in a summer term. As I mentioned beforehand, it can be really, really fast paced. So you don't have the flexibility to take an L on assignments. You don't have the flexibility to even miss classes. Rule of thumb, what I like to tell students, particularly regarding the requirements of a course, is that if you assume that each class period, because it's moving at a rapid pace, assume that each class period could be between 1 to 3 weeks of material, depending on how short that class could be. So I usually say 2 to 3 weeks to be on the safe side. So if you miss one class, that could be the equivalent of missing 2 to 3 weeks worth of content. And you would likely be expected to be well versed on that content by the next class period, which could even be the very next day. So the goal would be, try not to miss class. This ain't the time to take an L and to say I'm too tired. This lowest assignment will be dropped. That's actually one of my biggest pet peeves, because students will always say, I can just let this be dropped. How about you make it so that way a 0 is not the grade that's not dropped? But that's conversation for another day. But ultimately, you need to be mindful of the fact that the class is going to move on without you. The instructor is not going to say, oh, so-and-so is not here, therefore I'm just not going to teach the class for that day. They're going to move on. And the expectation is that even if you are not there, is that that you know that information. So it's imperative that you use time management to your advantage there. So one of the pieces of advice I like to give students regarding this particular rule is treat the class like your job, or even like your phone. Like you would have your phone and you would treat it like you would if you had a phone that was made of glass, like an iPhone or something of that sort, and somebody took it and was about to drop it, you about to be ready to fight. Please don't do that. I am not condoning violence. Just like you had a job that you cared for and that paid you well, you would make sure you got there on time and that you did what you were supposed to do. Treat the class the same way, so that way you're not in a situation where you're at a deficit because now you're trying to play catch up because something happened and you missed it. Now remember that classes move fast. So you want to use a calendar to help you keep track of all the dates. Don't just rely on the learning software or the syllabus to give you the dates or to go back to them. Put them in some sort of calendar that gives you reminders. Google Calendar is a great resource, so that way you don't forget anything. You want to put all assignments, not even major assignments. I'm talking about every single assignment, like that one 5-point reflection that says, tell me your name and what you're interested in. Yes, it may feel like a burdensome assignment. Do it. Put every single assignment in there, so that way you don't miss an assignment and you don't miss an opportunity for any points. And make sure you put office hours in your calendar as well, so that way you don't miss any single opportunity to get support. That way you can plan in advance. And that way, if you need to schedule, let's say, for example, a part-time job or other obligations, you're ensuring that you're scheduling around those two obligations. So class, of course, put that in your calendar so you don't forget. Put in office hours as well as all the major assignments, and make that class is your job for the summer. That is your focus to ensure that you give yourself the best chances to be successful. All right, now for that bonus tip that I promised. The bonus tip is form a study group. I know that seems weird to say that that's a bonus tip when some people are like, that might be more common sense, but you'll be surprised how many students kind of go off into silos in the summer because it's a long class period. There are other obligations. You got life. Some people may have kids, all those other things. I encourage you, implore you, I beg you, form a study group. Couple of benefits there. One, it's a fast-paced class, and the study group can be the difference between you doing well in a course or potentially falling short and not performing well. I actually used my very first summer, I was, after my first year in school, I took a math course, took a calculus course rather, and that study group I was in was invaluable. But in addition, if for any reason you were to get sick or miss a class, you have people in your study group who would have caught the notes. They can give you the information immediately. Now, granted, you don't want to use them as a crutch, but they're just there as an additional resource if something were to happen and you are not physically able to go. But in addition, y'all can go to office hours and divide and conquer. Let's say, for example, the office hours are scheduled during a time which you can't go because maybe you have to work or babysitting duty or whatever that might be. Life happens. Life be lifing. So if that's the case, then you can have classmates who go to office hours. You can figure out, sit together as a group, determine the questions that you have, and then you can appoint 1 or 2 people to go to office hours on behalf of the group to get those questions answered, to then share with the rest of the group. Now, again, that is a great resource. And it's also an opportunity. Study groups help you work smarter, not harder. Don't sit here and try to tackle it alone. Unless your instructor tells you specifically you cannot work with other people. Listen to your instructor if that's the case. But if not, study groups are going to be beneficial. And again, it could be the difference between you passing a course or potentially not getting the grade that you want or having to retake it, worst case scenario. Form a study group. I beg you. Find someone, even if you don't know anyone that's in the class that you know, this is a great opportunity to meet new friends. Form it within the first couple of days of the semester, so that way you're not that awkward person like 2 weeks into the semester saying, does anybody want to work with me? Don't be that person. It's a lot harder to get into a clique once it's already formed. So be that person joining in the clique. It's not to say it's not possible. It's just a saying. Do yourself a favor. All right, so those were the 4 expectations that you should have while going into a summer class, plus the bonus tip of studying with other people and forming a study group. So I hope you found this video to be helpful. As customary with all of my videos, the point of this channel is not to just give you information, but to empower you to apply the information. Again, the equation is knowledge plus application equals wisdom. So I encourage you within this next 30 seconds that we'll have a nice little timer that'll show up for you to reflect. Within the next 30 seconds, I want you to reflect on what is one thing. Well, one is one takeaway that you had, write it down. And what is one thing you can do within the next 24 hours to apply what you've learned. Even if you're not taking a class, that could be sharing the video with a friend. That could be writing down the notes to kind of put it in your Google Doc for you taking a class in the future. It could be you reaching out to an academic advisor to talk about taking a summer class, and it's not too late to enroll in a summer course. It really just depends on what it is that you want to do. But for the next 30 seconds, I want you to reflect on what you've learned and how you plan to apply it so that way you can do it. I'll see you in 30 seconds. Right. So I hope you had some really great takeaways and a great action item. Do me a favor and put your action item and your takeaways in the chat. I would love to see what stood out to you in the video, or even any suggestions that you have for any other videos. I'm always looking to figure out what it is that you want to answer. So if there are things that you would like to know, put them in the chat. This is a no shame zone. I want to make sure that you share what you want so I can provide you with those supports so you can win at college. I hope you found this video to be helpful. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with at least 2 or 3 people so they can get the same information as well. Go out and be great, and I will catch you in the next video. Peace.